So part of content creation always comes with getting feedback, listening, asking for it, and sometimes it can be a little bit harsh. So we want to talk today about just how it kind of is when you're creating content, asking for that feedback. It's a discussion with that guy right there, Matt Cicoria. We are in the beautiful Virginia Beach. I'm going to give you a little bit of like an intro, a little sizzle, a little zazz in that, and then we'll get into the content. Here we go. Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
Let's do it.
All right, welcome to the Daily BA. Today we've got the Matt Cicoria, the Behavioral Observations Podcast. Thanks for jumping on, man.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, met you, I think it was officially a year ago, roughly, right? At ABI in Denver.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly going to dinner with you and chatting about that we had a lot of similarities with some of the outdoors, good beer.
Oh, definitely good beer.
And then this creative realm, right, of just kind of experimenting around with different forms of media. We put behavior analysis out there. Real quick, what do you do? How did behavioral observations start?
Okay. I don't know if I have a quick story, but I'll do my best. My day job is I am a consultant in private practice. I provide services to schools in northern New England, particularly New Hampshire and Vermont. And in 2016, I started the Behavioral Observations Podcast, mainly because I felt that there wasn't a podcast out there that served this purpose. And the purpose that I was trying to serve was to provide interesting conversations for what I like to call everyday behavior analysts to listen to.
Yeah.
You know, we have a travel-intensive occupation. Most of us spend lots of time in our cars, and if there was a podcast that was out there doing what I was doing at the time, if there was a podcast out there, I probably would have never started it. But I kind of created it because I felt that there was a need. I kind of created a podcast that I felt like I would like to listen to. So.
And I think you filled that, right? Like the stats have been pretty solid.
It's succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Right now we have, I think, over 635,000 downloads.
It's insane.
In a little over 2 years, and it's been crazy, And what's also funny is that you can look in your stats and see the countries in which it's been downloaded, and so to see that it's been downloaded in places like Iran and all the other kind of far-flung places, it's pretty neat.
That's very cool.
It's been very rewarding.
So it's essentially kind of a twice a month episode that you upload.
Yeah.
Definitely going to link it down below if you haven't ran into it.
Yeah, behavioralobservations.com.
Yeah. And, all right, so I kind of teased yesterday, I wanted to talk about feedback. When you're out here, in a way, kind of forging ground in this field or industry in this sort of creative way, it's crucial that you have feedback from the community as to who it is that you're going to bring on, interview, right? How to kind of, I guess, shape your process and get better content out there. But there's also this other side that can be really, really tough to swallow sometimes, right? On the different forms of feedback that come in.
Sure.
So I want to tackle that today with you.
Okay.
Maybe we can just start at what are some things that you've experienced?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note, Ryan, that the feedback I've gotten from listeners, I've been extraordinarily lucky. That the feedback I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. So that's one thing.
I would say the same thing. It's like 99% of it is just like amazing. Keep creating, keep going, and at most it's kind of check these sort of things out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then every once in a while I'll get an unsolicited email or a review on my iTunes page it kind of sticks in your craw,
Yeah.
And so I try to do a couple of things with that. First of all, some of them I think they might be tough to hear. So one of the things I struggle with, and these are things I know I struggle with. So for me, it's information that of things that I need to work on. So some of the criticism that I get sometimes is the audio editing piece.
Okay.
And so, sometimes that's in my control, sometimes it's not. You're online a lot. Sometimes you get a really bad Skype feed, or the software that's recording, you think that's recording fine. In the background, something's getting garbled up, and things like that. And then obviously there's just I'm not an audio engineer, so there's that piece as well. So there's probably different ways to make it better, and so I've tried to learn as much as I can about it with the time I have to create this process. The second piece of feedback I hear quite a bit is me taking too long to kind of get to the point.
Okay.
I have this thing where I like to make sure the question I kind of
looked at
bumble out this long winded question. So I've been really trying to work on making my questions more concise. It's hard to think about in the moment when you're interviewing people, because doing an interview is an interesting juggle of tasks, because on the one hand you have to kind of really pay attention to what the person's saying, but there's all sorts of other processes whirring away in the background. You're thinking about the time commitments that you have. You're thinking about the list of questions you want to get to and whether they fit into the narrative. You're also trying to follow where the conversation's going. And sometimes the really fun interviews are the ones where they take off in unexpected directions. You have to be paying attention to do that. So I've found it a challenge to kind of do all those things simultaneously, and sometimes the consequence of that, I think, is being less than smooth on like follow-up questions and transitions from one section of the interviews to another. So even though the negative feedback has been overwhelmingly small, I think you and I were talking about earlier. They, like I said earlier, they do kind of stick in your craw.
They do,
and so I think the important lesson here is to kind of
maybe how to frame those sort of things, right?
Well, for me, yes, it's always nice when someone says, I wish you did A, B, and C differently, or I wish you would do A, B, and C instead. I have gotten an occasional email, rare, but an occasional email that has kind of not necessarily an ad hominem attack, but like something that was just, criticism is very, very general. Like, I can't even think of something like that, but off the top of my head.
It's just kind of like attacking like the creator themselves, like their person, rather than like a specific point, right?
Yeah.
It's like a you suck as opposed to.
I haven't gotten you suck. Well, I'm really thankful for that.
But that's what you're talking about, right? Like something very
but
broad.
I hear it as you suck, though, right? And so I think I know with your podcast, WWD. I know you did a whole episode on diffusion with Jonathan Tarbox, and those are the kind of skills that you kind of have to bring to bear when you read something that's really tough. And you can really let it bother you if you're not careful.
I've done a couple of calls for feedback on this channel, and I remember one distinctly where I had 5 or 6 people call in or write in or like video in, and one of them was about a 20-minute video, which is the most raw, honest feedback. And it was like 10:30 at night when I turned that thing on, and I watched the first 5 minutes, and I was like, phone was gone, like off, tossed it, passed out. I'll think about this tomorrow. Like it just had me viscerally like, it's just hard to swallow, right?
It totally is, especially
but it was like some of the most valuable feedback when you can dig through it, and it takes a lot to dig through it sometimes. Yeah,
and it's totally easy to get your feelings hurt because I know the amount of time you invest in this, right?
Likewise,
right? And so it's like when you it's like your baby. It's like someone telling your baby's ugly. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's the cutest baby in the neighborhood. So anyway, one thing I found too, I've done this a couple of times. Is sure, it's great when people go on iTunes and leave reviews, or if they post stuff on social media. That's I appreciate that. Whether the feedback is good, bad, or otherwise, I appreciate it nonetheless. But I did this twice, and I've really worked out well. I set up a survey, and I sent it out to my listeners. And I did it at about a year into the podcast, and then another year after that. And I think I'm going to make it kind of like an annual event. The last survey I got about 250 responses.
Nice.
So I figured that's I'm not a statistician, but I figure that's robust enough to give me some information. And I did ask some open-ended questions like the podcast would be better if,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
and
Yeah.
and some other things, you know, and as well as some other questions that try to address some of the areas that I know I need to improve in, and just seeing people's random comments. And to those of you who took the time to do that, I want to let you know I read every single comment in there, so I do take these things seriously. I read every single iTunes review.
Yeah.
Or at least the ones that I can see. I can't see,
Yeah.
as you know from
You
your
only
podcast.
see so many of them.
Yeah, you can only see the ones at least in the United States, and it's just a little, you know, sometimes there are reviews that happen overseas that it's hard for us to see those reviews in the, you know, kind of foreign iTunes
Yeah.
stores. But yeah, that survey was a very important tool, and so I feel like I can, you know, take the feedback a lot better knowing that I'm going out looking for
Yeah.
trouble, if you will, you know,
Yeah.
and so that I've learned quite a bit about, you know, what the viewers like, and conversely what they don't like,
Yeah.
the viewers, the listeners, you know,
Yeah.
so that's been a real valuable process.
Yeah, when I put out a couple surveys. One most recently, I just sent a bunch of direct messages through Instagram asking people for some general open-ended questions as well. It's like, what was your favorite video? What was your least favorite?
Mm-hmm.
How can I start to take that? I think one thing is getting that honest feedback is always critical. So I always tell people, write it in no matter how well or poorly written you think it actually is. But I can take the time to swallow my pride and like decipher that, right? But then I run this thing sometimes where people are like, they'll give me something, and this is just like, I need to get better at analyzing the situation. They'll be like, I don't like this video, right? Maybe, for example, but it's like, well, what part? There's, you know,
Yeah.
like 50 layers embedded into this video. Was it the text? Was it the audio? Was it, you know, the transitions and stuff like that? Which I feel like I'm getting better at.
Or maybe
Yeah.
they just get a feeling about the video,
Yeah.
you know, that they're not parsing those,
Yeah.
those discrete components. And maybe that's just their perception or their experience of watching the video.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing that's hard, is because you don't know whether or not someone's just, okay, this, you know, I you know, and it happens on the positive side too. I enjoyed this video. I enjoyed this podcast, and may, you know, not be able to specify what about it they really like.
And I
And
don't.
conversely, what they didn't.
Yeah, and I don't blame the learner for it. Just the more specific it is, easier it is
Sure.
to start to identify, right? And the last one would be, sometimes I get feedback where it's like, hey, what if you did this? And it's like, well, I don't really want to do that. Do you ever get that on the podcast?
Yeah. Sometimes I get suggestions for. No, I love getting suggestions. So I'm not saying this to kind of dampen this, but some people might write in and have a suggestion for something that I feel doesn't necessarily fit the idea behind the podcast.
Yeah.
So that's very rare, though. Lots and lots of people write me and say, hey, can you have this person on? Can you have that person on? And the answer is usually yes. And it's unfortunately just a function of time in terms of whether or not we can pull this off.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of back and forth that needs to take place in terms of matching up opportunities of time availability on
Yeah,
both.
cross busy professionals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I get the same thing on this sometimes when I'm asking. It'll be sometimes like a couple days before a conference and like try to land an interview with so and so, and it's like I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Not that you can't reach out and try.
Right.
So
And just to kind of piggyback on that, you don't know how many times I've taken my podcasting gear to conferences and never touched it.
Yeah.
I bring it with the intent that I'm going to get some content,
Yeah.
you know, and just
It's
because it's
extremely
so
difficult.
crazy busy at those events, it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. Okay, so if we were to kind of wrap this up, any take homes for people when it comes to delivering constructive feedback? Do you have any sort of tips, tricks on how to maybe do that?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of them we already covered. You know, if there's something specific that you think would make it better, then I would just kind of focus on that. Again,
It could be one little thing, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
This transition,
Right,
or this
right.
this second
You know,
on the podcast was kind of weird, right?
Yeah, and I don't expect people to go and timestamp things, but you know, I one of the things I do appreciate is that I've gotten some feedback about the varying levels of sound between between myself and the guest.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really tried very hard to make sure is improved. So that's a very specific thing that we can work on. You know, and again, the concision with questions, and I forgot to mention. I actually had one listener take data on filler words.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
so he took data. He said, that was a little rough, but he was spot on right. You know, that's definitely an area that I struggle with.
You totally threw that into your own value system of like databases.
That was hard. That was hard, but he was definitely right. So I definitely had to diffuse the hell out of that one.
I notice when I interview more, I say a lot.
I've got my own. So. I'm sure the listeners could rattle them off. They, you do this and you know.
Yeah. So yeah, I think providing that is always a great thing. It's just how you kind of soften it and introduce it is a skill that you need to practice over time. I definitely am okay with people writing in and practicing that sort of skill when it becomes something that's kind of a hidden, maybe your name's not on it, or it's an attack, or it's kind of with malintent. That's usually what I'm just like, there's no time for this.
Yeah.
You know, it's more of a community building and help each other out sort of thing.
Sure.
Especially when you're creating content that's largely freely out there, right?
Yeah, basically.
It's kind of like help me out is how I look at these sort of things.
Yep. There's been one or two emails in the hundreds of emails that I've received that I've just done the whole extinction thing with. It's tempting to write something nasty back or say, hey, find another podcast to listen to, or even more so like create your own. But again,
I think there's something to say there on the perspective taking side of it. I didn't realize how much work went into them. I mean, we have a whole team that 4 of us that work on Why We Do What We Do podcast. And you're a man of one that's producing it.
That's right.
I'm impressed with how much time that we individually put into it. That you're putting all that in yourself. So, if anyone's out there just hitting record and trying to edit something simple on any medium, I learned a ton as to just how difficult that is.
Yeah, it's very.
I challenge people to even just look into that a little on Google, and look into some tutorials on YouTube. It's interesting how just elaborate and crazy it gets.
Yeah. Or take out your phone and hit the voice recorder and try to speak for 2 minutes
without messing up.
Extemporaneously, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, cool. Anything else?
Well, thanks for having me on. Though. This has been great.
Yeah.
The last time you interviewed me, we lost the footage.
We did. Yeah, that was before like the big boy gear.
That's right. Now you're all grown up and professional. So you have no idea of the pro gear that this is being recorded on. It's very, 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 very nice.
It's getting there, right?
Yeah.
This time it will not be lost. I wanted to just do a quick shout out and call for anyone that can jump over and give you a quick review on iTunes. I know those things are huge for podcasts.
Yep.
So the link's down below. Go do that, please. And thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, and get some ratings and reviews out there for WWD, WWD too. So, ratings and reviews in iTunes really help to. Basically, there's some algorithm that Apple uses. And the more that ratings and reviews you get, the more you're
ranked, and the more you can be found, right?
Yep. Yeah. And so if you enjoy either of our podcasts and want to see them disseminated more widely, that's one way to do it. And then also it's very much appreciated when people share episodes on social media and things like that. It's always fun to see when people really
when they're really into it.
And then they take the time to say, hey, this check this episode out. I really got some out of it. That's pretty much the reinforcer.
The biggest reinforcer, I'd say, is when you see that you're like, yes, I produced something that someone really enjoyed.
All right, so we've been chatting for quite a while, so you're gonna have to do like a really pro, take us out of here, Ryan.
I got you.
Okay.
So I think that's it.
All right.
With that said, that's your Daily BA. That's how we do this.